Hi, I'm Sal Mercogliano, Associate Professor of History at Campbell University, a former merchant mariner, and an adjunct instructor in maritime industry policy at the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy. And happy Day of the Seafarer 2021. This Friday, June 25th, will be Day of the Seafarer. This is a holiday or an event that was marked to commemorate seafarers internationally by the International Maritime Organization. And over the past 2 years, seafarers have been treated pretty crappy. I'm going to say that right out the board. It's not been good across the board. Uh, I'm a advocate for the U.S. Merchant Marine. I talk about this all the time, but I'm also an advocate for seafarers out there in the world, no matter what flag, what nationality you are. I sometimes get dogged for hopping on American seafarers, but I have to tell you, I have compassion and zeal for all seafarers that are out there. And during COVID, and more importantly, even prior to COVID, mariners were not treated very fairly, in my opinion. One of the advantages we have as a international traded commodities go around the world, and we benefit from them as part of a global economy, is we get people to do the dirt work for us at fairly cheap prices. And part of that is global transportation and seafarers, which come from all around the world, but usually companies will find seafarers who are the lowest paid they can find because that's a big expense for them. Crewing and personnel costs are pretty expensive. And this is why post World War II, with the creation of the Panama Registry during World War II, and then shortly after that, the Liberian Registry, and then the Marshall Islands, and then the creation of the former British colonies into open registries, you have these countries that are created where the mariners come from all around the world. And again, companies shop around for them. They have agencies that get them mariners to come on board. They're trained and certified, and off they go. But I wanted to make you aware of a couple of stories, and I think really important to kind of talk about this. So, number one, this is the story right here, Day of the Seafarer 2021. This is the International Maritime Organization talking about it. I'm going to come back to this in a minute because one of the things that they did is they've been running a poll, 10 question or 9 questions they've been asking of seafarers. I'm going to go through that poll in a second, but I want to go over to someone who else runs a podcast, in this case, on the maritime industry. And that podcast, if you haven't had an opportunity to listen to it right here, this is it. This is the shipping podcast. This is with Lena Gothberg out of Sweden. And Lena does a fantastic job. Lena just absolutely knocks it out of the park. She's on her, what is she on? 165th episode right here. And they're all right here for you to listen to. You can go all the way here to the very first one she did way back in 2015. When she started it off, she interviewed the master of the Maersk McKinney Moeller, one of the big triple E's at the time. And Lena Gothberg has done a great job since then. It tends to be a little more European focused, but definitely she does interviews, and so it's a little different than what I do. So she interviews people. So she always has somebody on, an influencer, someone who's major in the industry, from different aspects of the industry, and which is great. Again, that's not what I do. I don't do a lot of interviews. I'll do interviews of select people every now and then. But she does this, and one of the interviews she just did, and this just posted the other day, was with Frank Coles. You see it right here, British American entrepreneur, maritime lawyer. And the reason I'm mentioning this, and the reason I'm touting someone else's podcast, like Sal, you're an idiot. You're touting somebody else's podcast. Why would you do that? Is because not only am I touting it, but over on G Captain, so is John Conrad and the crew at G Captain. This is the story they have right here. That is Frank Coles right there. And right here, one of the things that Frank says in the midst of that interview is seafarers need to strike, says Frank Coles. We need a global strike of all seafarers because change has never happened without something really bringing the role of the seafarer to the forefront. While we continue to have seafarers who work in squalid and appalling conditions, while nobody in government is willing to stand up, nothing is going to change. And I have to tell you, historically speaking, that is exactly true. Why are American mariners the best paid, highest paid mariners? is because they realized collective bargaining, striking worked, especially on the West Coast. The West Coast in the early 20th century was the scene of multiple maritime strikes, and for a couple of good reasons. Number one, it was U.S. and there was an environment for that, especially in the 1930s with things like the National Labor Relations Board. But more importantly, only a couple of ports right there. So when you shut down the port, when you shut down, a strike, it has a massive influence. Now, what he's talking about here is not destroying global trade. That's not what he's out here to talk about. Frank Coles is not talking about disrupting trade, but what he wants to do is bring attention to what's going on. I go back over here to Lena's episode, and here you see a couple of things that Frank is speaking about, things that need to change for the seafarer to have a future. One, a clear career path. What's the career path? A lot of mariners are getting on and doing one or two voyages. That's it, and they get off. And I sailed for 3 years and then went ashore for 4 years. And then I left the industry. And one of the reasons I left for 3 years is the shipping company I was working for, Military Sea Lift Command. You worked long time at sea. First ship I was on was 11 months. And at the time I was sailing with them was on average usually about 6 months. And then you're off for a month and then back on again. And there's no rhyme or reason to get that set up. There's no, hey, I'll be home for Christmas, or you miss holidays, you miss everything. Every day's Monday, you're working every day. And it's hard. It's great if you want that kind of life. It was a lot of fun. Don't get me. I would never exchange it because I had a great time doing it. But it's not conducive for family life. I joke about the fact that my wife, after we got married, said, can't live with that, Giselle. I need you at home. That changed about 10 years into the marriage when she was ready to send me back out to sea again. But guess what? Too late. Changed careers at that point, and she stuck with me. But a clear career path is really important. Advancement. One of the things that makes the maritime industry very unique, you can go to a maritime college, a maritime academy, become an officer, but you can go up through the hawse pipe. You can actually work your way up from the bottom ranks all the way up to master or chief engineer. Sorry, I got a little bug in here. Master or chief engineer. That's one of the great things about the maritime industry. It's a meritocracy. You go, you get your sea time in, you take your test, and you advance up in the ranks. Now you got to find the job, and that's the big thing that Frank is talking about. There's got to be those jobs and opportunities out there for the seafarers. And even though we've expanded the size of the shipping fleet, I mean, we talk about this all the time on this videos, how big the world maritime fleet is, but in truth, the number of jobs is not growing as fast because guess what? We're automating. We are basically cutting back on jobs. And so that career path is very tough. Getting paid. Ran stories about the minimum wage for mariners, $21.07 a day, which is, that may be a livable wage in some countries around the world. But the problem is it shuts out other nations that want to do it. One of the things that was hoped when the International Maritime Organization was created is that we can standardize some stuff, things like wages. But guess what? Companies are going to pay what they can pay. And, I joke around it all the time. If McDonald's and Walmart, not to pick on McDonald's and Walmart, but if they can pay, below minimum wage, they would. Why do they not pay below minimum wage? Because they're forced to. And so getting paid, getting paid is a big one. And you have to understand, in the American maritime industry, one of the things that was held over mariners wasn't just the level of pay, was getting paid, period. You wouldn't be paid until you were done with your voyage. And so money was withheld. And that was an issue. Getting fed. You sail on a ship in the American Merchant Marine on an international voyage, you sign something called shipping articles. And included in those shipping articles is provisions about what you will be fed. In other words, how many ounces of meat, your protein, you're guaranteed a day. It's in there, which sounds stupid, but it's in there because guess what? That was an issue. What is an issue had been an issue for the United States Merchant Marine in the 19th century is an issue for the world Merchant Marine in the 21st century. What we have done is pushed off the issues out of our wheelhouse over into someone else's wheelhouse. And understand, you can sit there and say, it's not my problem. I don't care. But the goods you got coming to you are on those ships, and you're paying for that. When you sit there and say whether or not you condone slavery or anything like that, and you sit there and say, well, slavery's in the past, I don't have to deal with slavery in the United States anymore. That was an issue in the past. If you're buying goods and the manufacturers are using slave labor, or worse, the shipping companies are using wages. Now, they're not paying slave wages, obviously. They're paying wages. But are you getting paid a fair wage? Getting to go home. I wish I had this video running in 2020 because I can tell you right now what the videos in the late 2020 would have been talking about is the seafarer plight. The fact that mariners were extended on voyages, stuck on board vessels, and could not get home. And countries would not allow the mariners to get on board flights and rotate home. And even when we get vaccines, we're not getting vaccines into the arms of those mariners so that they can rotate home and be able to fly home. And mariners were stuck on vessels for extended long periods of time, which increased accidents and, more importantly, displaced part of the workforce. Mariners who were waiting to get on ships couldn't get on. They found other jobs. Mariners who've been on board for a long period of time went home and they ain't doing that again. And we've had a real big dysfunction in this field. You're going to see this in the cruise industry right now. The cruise industry is all amped up about getting the boats back out and everything. They got to find crews, and crews are going to be a big issue for them going forward. And finally, allows breaks to get some rest also when in port. We have turned vessels into machines coming in and out of port. I mean, the minute you're throwing lines off, cranes are coming in, you're offloading, you're pumping off fuel, you're loading bulk cargo. There is almost no lay time. One of the issues we have in the United States right now with getting the cargo out of port is, why are we not running the ports 24/7? Well, you can't run the ports 24/7 because truck drivers can't work 24/7. So you can't drive vehicles all day long. You have to have lay time. Well, ships don't. Ships don't have lay time. There's no shore leave. I know you've seen movies where, the crew comes off and, we're going to head into town. That doesn't happen anymore. You're lucky if you tie up alongside of a berth, you're in port for maybe a day, maybe. And hopefully there's a seamen's club or a seamen's church or something within the port that you can go to for just a little bit of relaxation. And you're just sitting there with other people. But guess what? You got to be back on the boat because you're always on watch. You're on watch in the next 4 or 8 hours. So it's not like you can do anything. And you got to get back on board. And that is the issue. So listen to Frank's talk. I think it's really important because it talks about that. I want to go back to this issue here. This is the Day of the Seafarer. And I want to come over to these polls they did. So they did a series of polls, which I found very interesting. Because again, they're trying to find out what's going on. I'll get my mug off here so you can see this a little better. And let's zoom in here a little bit better on some of these things. And there's videos with these things, but I want to talk about each of these things here. So some of these polls. Do you feel adequately trained to tackle the challenges in shipping in the future? So they didn't ask about today, but they asked about the future, which I thought was really interesting. And you see almost an even split that. Yes, I am. No, I need more training. And then 11% training cannot keep pace with the speed of change. So if you add those two up, over half of the mariners out there are saying that they don't feel adequately trained to deal with the challenges in shipping coming forward. That's a big issue. It's a massive issue. Do you know what to do if you find yourself in need of help while on board? 66% said, yes, I know who to contact. 18% not sure. 17% no, I have no idea. That's great. If 2/3 of the people on board say, yes, I know who to contact, that's great. My question is, what if it's mental? What if it's something that is dealing with you at home with the family? What kind of protections do we have for those mariners on board? If you're suffering stress, and again, post-traumatic stress happens not just for those in combat, but it's a harrowing job. There's a lot goes on in shipping, I have to tell you. And where do you go for that? Where do you go for that? And a third of the people either are not sure where to look or have no idea. Next, as a seafarer, do you feel a responsibility to help fight climate change? Over half say that yes, they are. And 30% said I should do more. So one of the big things in the maritime industry is the issue of climate change. They know this. The big issue that's going to go forward over the next 30 years is going to be a massive change in the technology that propels these vessels. We went from coal to oil to from steam to diesel. Now we're getting ready to go even more so. And we're going to see some innovative methods about that. 6, how has the COVID-19 pandemic changed the future of seafaring? All you got to see is this one: 73% for worse. It's worse. Thanks to COVID-19, it is worse. We're in the United States right now. We're suffering this kind of reopening, getting used to the idea of not wearing masks and touching people, which is so weird right now. It's just, being able to shake hands and see people. But for the mariner out there, they think it's worse. 5, how do you feel about autonomous shipping? Autonomous shipping is this idea of automated shipping without crews. 25% excited, 22% no strong feelings, 39% worried, only 14% accepted. I have to tell you about autonomous shipping. I have a big problem with autonomous shipping. I don't think that, number one, an insurance company is ever going to allow a vessel to sail with no crew on board. But the issue here is reducing the size of the crews even more on a vessel. Again, go to Ever Given, 220,000 tons, 18,000 boxes on that vessel, 25 crew members. Is that sufficient? Puts a lot of work on those 25 people. Do you think the maritime sector is doing enough to encourage diversity? 42% no, not enough is being done. 37% yes, but more can be done. So obviously, diversity is a big issue. Women in the maritime sector are very rare. There's not a lot of them, but we're seeing more out there, which is great. Exactly what you want to see. The danger is being the one woman on a ship with 24 guys. Obviously, situations can arise where there needs to be protection, there needs to be encouragement, there needs to be the old boys club needs to be broken up. And we're seeing that. And I have to say, diversity speaking, the most diverse crews I've ever seen in terms of race have been mariner crews. I have to say, all the times I've ever sailed, it is always one of the most diverse organizations I've ever been with. And I grew up in Southern Long Island in New York, and the most diversity I'd ever seen in my life was going on board a ship and realizing, wow, there is a lot of difference between people. And it was I will argue a flaw in my upbringing that I was not exposed to more diversity than they should have been. The maritime sector has that in terms of race, but we're working on it in terms of gender. 3, in light of the COVID-19 impact on Seafarer, what is the most important for you for your future as a seafarer? Guaranteed access to repatriation and crew change. Man, again, this is the big issue after COVID-19 is that being able to get off the boat. You're so excited. The two most exciting days on a ship are getting on and getting off. That's it. You're excited about getting on. You're excited to see who's on board. You're excited to the new experience. But when you want to get off, you want to get off. So that is a really important thing. And then the other things are really important here too. Priority vaccinations, absolutely important. Safe working conditions, tantamount. Enforcement of the MLC. This is the labor convention, the Maritime Labor Convention, ensuring that you're not working beyond the time that you're supposed to. I think all 4 of those are really important. I don't even know how you pick one over the other. Number 2, who should be responsible for a fair future for seafarers? And I found this one really interesting. Over half the people here said it's a shared responsibility. It's not just solely on IMO, and government agencies. It's not just on the shipping companies, and it's not just on the seafarers, but it's everyone. And one of the things that I hope is happening, especially with my YouTube broadcasts, is we're exposing the maritime industry to a larger percentage of the public who may not know a lot about it. And hopefully you're finding some more information out there on it. Again, I try to recommend Lena, for example, with her shipping podcast. There's some great seafarers I've highlighted in the past who do videos from on board vessels. There's some great ones out there. Sorry about that. What area most needs improvement to ensure a fair future for seafarers? Working conditions, first choice. Working conditions need to be improved. And again, something as simple as internet access. I will tell you, if you can have internet access on a ship at sea, that would make life so much easier for mariners. Being able to be in contact is such a thing. When I sailed, we didn't have the internet. So, the first thing you do is when you come ashore is you run to the nearest phone booth, had a card with all the international phone numbers so you can call the United States and you were able to call home. But then you go back at the sea and you're out of touch for weeks or months at a time. Next, obviously, salary. Money's important. Then training, and then safety. Safety comes last. And I always think that's very interesting because, again, one of the things that people are doing is they realize they're taking a risky job. I mean, you're taking chances in your hand. You're going out in the middle of the ocean. And so it can be a difficult choice. And so I thought for this week with again the Day of the Seafarer coming on Friday, thought I'd give you a little highlight of this, talk about this a little bit more as we get going here. So again, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please take a look over at Lena's podcast. Listen to the talk by Frank Coles. I think it's a great talk. I enjoyed it immensely. Lena does a great job with it, about an hour long. You can download it and listen to it at your convenience. Go over to G Captain, read the story by John Conrad in there. that talks about this. And as always, if you enjoy this video, please subscribe to the channel, give it a thumbs up so other people will find it. Hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. And until the next episode of What's Going On with Shipping, this is Sal signing off.